Secretariat's co-chairs Jeanette Mohammed and Dennis Waweru argue the initiative was supported by over 4 million Kenyans, and therefore they have to pursue the matter to the very end. And as Duncan Haimba reports, it seems the legal cum political battle royale is far from over.
As the Attorney General prepares to stage his final attempt of rescuing the BBI train that has been pushed off the rails twice by 2 courts, BBI promoters say the struggle continues.
The initiative was supported by over 4 million Kenyans. Their overriding sentiment is that we must pursue this matter to the very end.
We want to keep pushing because we are determined to ensure that some of the very novel proposals in the BBI are not lost. And if they have to be lost, it must be known that we made our best efforts to secure them. There is the real possibility of a national crisis if some of the BBI provisions don't become law.
The Secretariat admitting that their only hope now lies in the apex court, the Supreme Court.
We believe that the 2 lower courts failed to appreciate the delicate balance needed in resolving an issue like the one before us. And only the Supreme Court judges have both the vocation and the mandate to do so.
Just like the lower court, the 7-judge appellate bench also declared the BBI referendum push null and void.
We are determined to soldier on. If the lessons of the past are to be our guide, the BBI too will come to be realized if we fight hard enough, and we are determined to fight hard enough.
Appeal Court had also called out Suna East lawmaker Jeanette Mohammed for pushing for a popular initiative, yet he is a sitting member of parliament.
Even the parliamentary way is open to Wanjiku. Wanjiku can give a member of parliament a petition to parliament to do a constitutional change.
Hatungekuwa hapa, si tungerekebisha hii kitu na tungeondoa ile makosa iko ndani yake. Lakini sasa kwa vishindo na nguvu na kifua walisukuma BBI. Sasa saa hii imeanguka, wanajaribu kunilaumu mimi. Sasa mnanilaumu namna gani? Na niliwaambia mapema iko matatizo na hii kitu. Ile niliwaambia si ndio hii wameambiwa na mahakama.
Attorney General Paul Kihara Kariuki will be formally filing the petition at the Supreme Court next week. Duncan Haimba, KTN News.
Okay, so it's not over until it's over. It seems they're taking the fight to the Supreme Court right now, and according to the Attorney General, he'll focus on 3 issues that actually revolve around the presidency in terms of presidential immunity, the remit of constitutional amendment by popular initiative, and the applicability of the basic structure doctrine. Now, Kasim Tandaza, I know you are a supporter of the BBI, and it was unfortunate, according to you, that the courts put a stop to this issue that had noble proposals for Wanjiku back at home. But why not go the IPPG route right now? Well, why take it to the Supreme Court? I think that's what many Kenyans might be asking.
Just I have been a supporter of the BBI because of the content. Certainly, I'm not a lawyer. I cannot really authoritatively comment about the right processes or the wrong process. From where I sit, a popular initiative will end up at the referendum. A parliamentary route, 2 things can happen. If the matters that are being amended in the Constitution do not touch the issues on the Constitution which call for a referendum, then once passed by 2/3 majority and assented by the President, the Constitution will stand amended. But if it touches on the areas where it needs a referendum, it can still go to a referendum. Now, I'm really getting disillusioned here, though I've been a very strong supporter of the BBI, and I'm still a sport supporter of the BBI because of the content. I want devolution strengthened, I want equal marginalization addressed, I want historical land injustice addressed, so many things there. Entrenching CDF in the Constitution and many other things. Of course, there are things which I might not support, but I normally talk about the cost-benefit analysis, the good versus the bad. So ultimately, I support BBI. But as I've said, I'm getting disillusioned because I'm not now quite sure whether the promoters of BBI wanted actually those constitutional changes. Because if they now say they're going to the highest courts, certainly the timelines are moving from bad to worse. And I don't know what they intend to achieve out of it. The easiest, simplest route, as you are actually mentioning, is the moment the High Court declared the process, because they didn't actually address themselves to the content, basically the process, unconstitutional. That, to me, from where I sit, and I'm glad that there is a lawyer on the panel, he can correct me, we should have taken the parliamentary route. And the parliamentary route would have been a plus in two fronts. One, for those items which don't need a referendum, like the issues on devolution, the issues on CDF, the many other issues, they would have passed, and by now we would have amended the constitution. For those which need a referendum, if, as initially thought, the promoters just wanted a referendum for political expedience for the 2022 succession matrix, then they would still have gone for a referendum, because from where I sit, for the matters which need a referendum, it's not that they have to come through a popular initiative. Through a parliamentary initiative, they can be taken through parliament, they get the 2/3 majority, only that the president does not assent for the amendment, but now they have to be taken again for a referendum. So the referendum will still be there if the idea was to have a referendum. But honestly, from where I sit now, I'm really getting disillusions about the promoters that probably, as I've said, there could have been a script behind this script. They never wanted the changes at all. Otherwise, by now, we should have taken the parliamentary route long ago. And by going to courts, I think the lawyers on the panel would advise us, are we able to discuss matters, the same issues which are in court, in parliament, and given the timelines after the court pronounces itself, whether they uphold the appellant court's decision or they actually allow the BBI process that it was now lawful, it was constitutional, it can proceed. At what point now are we going to achieve the benefits, which for some of us who have been strong supporters of the document, we wanted those benefits as earlier as yesterday. So I'm now beginning to put question marks into the promoters, but I believe from our committees in Parliament, JLAC and other committees, it's high time they actually take those good suggestions, those good amendments to the Constitution back to Parliament, and I'm quite sure they are going to get quite an overwhelming support. Therefore, we can't save the good. Otherwise, instead, if we rely on the route that, especially Junet saying that we need to fight hard and continue fighting, I really can't see how much fight, up to what point we are going to gain the better part of the constitutional amendments which were given. So I'm ready for the parliamentary initiative.
Okay, you've raised a couple of issues. The timelines issue, sub judice perhaps might be a hindering factor. Let's bring in Isaac Mora. Well, what's your take on this? You might have been against the BBI, but they're noble proposals, and that's why I put the question out there in terms of the parliamentary route. But let's comment on taking it to the Supreme Court. Do you think this is an effort in futility? Is it a good idea from where you sit?
Yeah, I'm in this part of courtesy of the fact that I was in the reference group of the 2010 Constitution. In fact, I am very privileged to be amongst only 6 Kenyans who are given the first draft of the current Constitution at KICC in the presence of President Kibaki and Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Okay. So, I mean, by Zamba Kitonga. I think that is why I'm in this panel in November of 2009. And to see the whole process of BBI, I was also involved in championing for the rights of marginalized groups of people, in particular persons with disabilities. I call the process a mockery of their own rights because it had removed all of the representation in the Senate, in the National Assembly, and there were no guarantees as to operationalize the 5% job quota provided for in Article 54(2). All of those were not quite achieved. I mean, what we were able to push for is 4 slots in the National Assembly. The representation in the Senate, which is a much smaller house, had been taken away. And that, for me, I think is very, very unfortunate. Currently, county assemblies don't have representation, as it were, and we need a man and a woman there. Now, coming to the whole gamut of the process. Now, the court has been invited to address principles and the process of the BBI. And the first principle is a basic structure doctrine, which has been upheld by 11 judges as we speak right now, that the basic structure doctrine applies to our jurisdiction. That is to mean the primary role of changing the basic structure of the Constitution, as it were, lies with the people. Then the basic structure principle also, therefore, limits amendments, which are supposed to be minor. They're not supposed to be so major. I think there are over 58 amendments as per the BBI draft amendment bill. And then that introduces the other issue of the illegality of the constitution of the BBI Constitutional Amendment Bill 2020. How? In terms of the process. The BBI steering committee is illegal because it initially was not set up to amend the Constitution, but rather to look into ways of how bridging the bridges, amongst Kenyans. And that was not a proposal that came from Kenyans. In fact, the amendment of the Constitution was an afterthought. And further to it, again, in terms of the process, is the IEBC's lack of quorum, and therefore the administrative decisions becoming null and void to that extent. Now, the issue that is being taken to the Supreme Court is with regards to the immunity of the presidency, because both courts have found, with a majority, that a sitting president does not have immunity, apart from Tuyot, who thought otherwise, maybe one other that I may not, I think Hannah Okwengu, that a sitting president can actually have civil suits instituted against him. And I think that is okay, because it makes the president accountable to the rule of law. And further to it, the issue of the fact that this whole process is a political one. Now, I think, my brother, some people are trying to justify their pay. How can you have the courts having ruled that a popular initiative cannot be sponsored by government, and who is appealing? The Attorney General. So on one part, Kihara Kariuki is my good friend. He's also trying to defend, because the new Attorney General in the BBI is a very powerful Attorney General. Extremely powerful. He's a Jonjo reincarnated.
Okay.
But they are trying to justify that they're right. And you see now, Junet Mohammed and Wawero are coming there saying that they are going to be supporting. It should have been the other way around. If truly this was a popular initiative, then we would have been seeing, particularly Dennis Wawero, who is no longer a sitting member of parliament, going to do it. But you see, they are not. It's not them. Dennis Wawero is representing the president. Junet Mohammed is representing Raila Odinga. They are not the ones who are driving this process. Right. They are just red herrings. They are the poster boys. and so, therefore, it will still be dismissed at the Supreme Court, in my opinion, because this does not, become a popular initiative. But I had my colleague there saying about there would have been separation of issues. At some point, there was a very robust debate to go through the parliamentary way. But I think because of this braggadocio and bravado and chest thumping and political hubris, people, though that they have the whole of the country under their feet, it doesn't work that way. There have political allegiances have shifted. People have changed perspectives, and I don't think with the current economic crisis in this country, many people don't think that the referendum is a priority. There are some areas, for example, the parliamentary seats. I do agree that there is a lot of underrepresentation. I come from Ruiru. We have 490,120 people represented by one member of parliament, compared to Turkana East, which has got 15,600 people. You cannot have the same representation in that regard. However, that process is provided for independently in Article 89 of the Constitution, and IBC is supposed to review boundaries every 8 to 12 years. So if you have 290 constituencies, you can thus amend. You don't need a referendum to do so.
All right. So under-representation, basic structure doctrine, presidential immunity are after the issues that come out from this BBI narrative. So Abdullahi, from where you sit, add your voice to these issues that stick out, because you played a critical role in the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution. Did you foresee some of these challenges and perhaps answer in terms of the criticism being pointed towards the legal advisors of government? Did they fail in their part in terms of advising when it comes to the process in amending the Constitution?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was a lot of misunderstanding of the Constitution. We don't need to amend the Constitution, as it were, because it's only how many years? 10, 11 years? Very infant. We haven't even completed the wholesale implementation of it. And here we are already trying to change this, change that, to suit, the interest of the political class. And I think presidential immunity or representation, and I disagree with my friend here, Maura, about representation that 490 Ruiru and Turkana is what? The thing is, there are certain criteria for representation explicitly written in the Constitution. And that's what IEBC and anyone else has to follow. And you know what? I want to, again, come to Maura. For 38 years and 24 years of Moi, people who are in power always control the narrative that we are the majority, the narrative that certain parts of the country are more densely populated than others. And let's be honest, that is a narrative perpetuated by those in power. In reality, it could be different at all. And you find that, narratives are propagated to suit a certain goal and objective. And that's exactly what is happening with BBI. You find that, our Constitution as it is really pricks. It makes the politician, it gives no room for the politicians to maneuver and, perpetuate themselves in office and so on. That's why they want to change the Constitution, so that they, protect those interests, their wealth, their whatever, or everything. But then look at America, look at South Africa, where today Zuma is where? He's wearing a prison uniform. Look at Trump. The Constitution is catching up with him for all the misdeeds that he did while in office. Therefore, the BBI is a handshake agreement between two heavyweights, political heavyweights, in the last general elections, and because of the violence that came after the elections, then they came together to make peace, amends between themselves. But that should not, encourage the amendment of the Constitution. Let's empower IEBC. Let's empower all other institutions that the Constitution has. That way, we can have a prosperous, stable country for the future, not the daily changing whims of our political class.
Okay, so from where you sit, were there any noble proposals in the BBI? Because you're hammering the BBI initiative proper, Abdullahi. Were there any noble proposals?
Well, I've not seen any, to be honest. And BBI is just, some kind of route map to create two Kenyans. For example, the Kenya of the high productivity and the other Kenya, as it was during the colonial times, where northern Kenya was separately, so marginalized from the rest of Kenya. But today, because of BBI, Coast will join us in that marginalization. Parts of Okambani will join us in the marginalization, and so on. So the thing is, this is the hegemonic, domination of, those who have been in power for so long. The political, communities, the Nyanza and Central Kenya have always dominated the political sphere. But then, what has it brought us? Just pain and underdevelopment? No. BBI is not worth the paper it's written on.
Okay, so Maura, I'll give you a chance to reply before we cross over to Kasim on the issue of marginalization. He brought up the critical issue of underrepresentation, and he took a sharp contrast from what you mentioned. Well, what's your take on that?
I think we agree more than we disagree. Maybe he's just... But the matter is that constituencies have always been increased since times immemorial. In fact, I think they started with 12, and now we are at 349. Including the 12 initially for special interest groups. And we need to, the problem we have is because we have tied representation with the resource allocation. And politics, as Hayek says, is he who gets what, where, and how. I hasten to add that politics is the informal that constitutes the formal. You cannot therefore justify that underrepresentation of 500,000 people having one member of parliament and 15,000 people having another member of parliament. There is no equality of vote there. It goes against the democracy. So you have to have a minimum to a max, we say we represent people between this number and that number, and that has been overtaken with time because Kenya is now a country of 50 million Kenyans. So you need to have a delimitation of boundaries, and that's why IBC has given that express power. I don't think my brother here should be offended by that. And that we were entrenching CDF into the Constitution means it further marginalizes people so that those who are from the densely populated constituencies would get less bursaries per capita. And that's not really fair. Okay. By the way, if you talk about sessional paper of 1965, the African socialism and economic development versus the sessional paper of my friend, former Minister for Northern Affairs. You don't cure one form of marginalization by creating another one. I don't agree. Okay. That is called retributive justice. What you do is you make sure you leverage on the resources that there are, because there is an anti-devolution practice. We want resources to go to the counties, and they have actually caused what I call countyism, where people now are not even focusing on their tribes. They're saying, what is my county of Vihiga getting vis-a-vis that one of Kakamega? And you can go on and on and on. Now, countyism is also bringing out issues of corruption, where those who steal, they invest around the county. However, those who are stealing big money are repatriating those monies back to Nairobi, because that is where you have greater returns on investment. It's defeatist.
Okay, noted. Kasim Tandaza, quick rebuttal before we take a short break.
I totally, and I find this amazing when I'm talking to a fellow parliamentarian for that matter, and but not surprised if that parliamentarian is coming from Kiambu. Remember, Kiambu has had the privilege, or Mount Kenya region, or Central, have had the privilege of having the first president of this Republic of Kenya. And we are where we are because of the way the presidents have been handling that presidency, that whoever is at the top, he normally thinks about his region, not Kenya as a whole. And that is why Abdullahi is talking about marginalization of coast, Eastern, parts of Eastern, and Northeastern. Mwaura, let's be practical. You come from Kiambu, fine, you could be having a constituency of 400 people, but we've never had people dying out of hunger. We've never had people dying for, like now we're having in Turkana, people walking miles and miles, searching for water. Mwaura, let's be human. Even the people in Turkana are human beings. You cannot say now those ones have never been marginalized, and you are marginalized because you are 400. You have everything. Kiambu County has 5 referral hospitals, when a county like mine, Kwale, does not have. We have only 2 ICU beds. You have all the ICU beds. Thank God for the privileges that you've had over time since independence. So for sure, as Kenya, if we want to maintain this Kenya as one, us as leaders, we need to go beyond our personal or our ethnic regions, thinking that we need everything in our regions. Look, Mwaura, what is happening? If you compare the projects, even with the big 4 projects happening, do we have such mega roads in Turkana? Do we have such mega roads in Kwale? Do we have such mega? Do we have the privileges that we are having in Kiambu. So for sure, this constitution, and I'm talking the matter as BBI, it was going to address this issue. Remember the issue of the equalization fund, which you people oppose. You simply say probably what were planning were vivu, they have been lazy. That is why they have not been able to develop their area. Surely, if the system, and this is taxpayers' money, the allocation favors some regions from the national government, our only hope can be the devolution, strengthening government, increasing the allocation, which you people are opposing, because you are quite sure whatever remains with the national government will benefit either the Mount Kenya region or Rift Valley. And that is why you are opposing BBI, because you think now if more resources are taken to the counties, then there is less of the national government to benefit your regions. So from where I sit, we need to reason. We need to look at Kenya as a whole, appreciate that since independence, there are some regions which have been marginalized, and going forward, unless we reach to a point where tutasema sasa nchi zanywe kila mtu abaki na kipande yake, which to me I don't advocate for that. I still for one Kenya. We need to look ahead and appreciate the difficulties that other parts are facing in this region. The BBI, to me, was a good document in terms of the content of it. If it can come to the promoters, can appreciate the parliamentary initiative, I would urge all leaders, all parliamentarians. Of course, for the bad sections, they can't be rejected. But for the sections which would bring Kenya together, at least try to share the national cake at that level, everybody should support that too.
Okay, well noted, Kasim. As you can see, it's quite an emotive issue, and that will form part of the next discussion we're set to have after the break. I mean, with the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, you'd expect such conversations around resources and who is in the top seat position would have ended with devolution having coming through. So we'll try and criticize and analyze the